Which Camino was the best? Literally got back a week ago from walking on 4 different Caminos, and I thought I'd share this week my impressions of those different routes and which one I thought was best. Coming right up. So I haven't been on Camino for so long, and through COVID, and I was doing all my planning and desperate to get back to the Camino. And so this year I decided to walk an extra long one for me that is, and cover a number of different routes. So I thought I'd talk about, quite briefly this week, what those routes were, how they were different, and which one I thought was the best. And I'll leave that until the end. You can try and guess as we go through the video. So all up, I was on Camino for about 60 days, including, I think, 3 rest days. And I walked about 1,200 kilometers, and I literally got back a week ago. So I have so much material. I shot loads of videos while I was there, lots of photos. If you haven't seen the blog on that trip, do go and have a look at Rob's Camino. And so it's robscamino.com, and across the top you'll find the menu drop downs. Go to 2023 and you can see the daily blog and the gallery and all that kind of stuff. But for this week, I just want to kind of introduce that particular journey and what I thought was the best bit and why. And then in coming weeks, I'll delve into all sorts of topics that came up. So if you've been on the channel for a while, you know I'm not really one of those people who stays in albergues. This time I made sure I did, so that I didn't miss out on the experience. And I really wanted to fully sort of engage with that Camino experience. Stayed in loads of albergues. They were all good. So I'll do a video just on those. I'll do a video on a particular one that was awesome on the top of a mountain. So many topics. I think I've got a year's worth of videos. But for now, what was the journey and what was the best bit? So it was a combination of the Via de la Plata, onto a bit of the Camino Frances, the Camino Invierno, and then the Camino Fisterra at the end. So let me just kind of step through, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the differences between those and which bit I thought was the best and why. And then in future videos, I'll talk in a lot more detail about the individual Caminos. So first of all, the Via de la Plata. If you haven't come across that one before, it runs south to north. So I started in Sevilla, down south in Spain, and it runs north. It goes through some amazing old ancient Roman cities like Merida and Salamanca, Zafra, Zamora. Amazing Camino. And as you get further north to a little village called Granja, you can either take 2 routes. You can swing off to the west and join the Camino Sanabres towards Santiago, or you can go north to Astorga and join the Camino Frances. And that's the way that I decided to go because, well, I'll come to that in a moment. I particularly wanted to get back to the Camino Frances. So what was the Via de la Plata like? It's one of those ones that has a bit of mystique about it, I think, because of the vast distances involved, some of the logistics challenges, because there are quite large distances, and you don't have the sort of facilities that you do, say, on the Camino Frances, where every few kilometers you hit a village with a cafe. Most days on the Via de la Plata, you don't hit anything until the end of your walking day. You might go through a couple of villages, but there won't be anything open generally. So it's quite different. It's very remote. It's fairly flat most of the time. If you like the Meseta on the Camino Frances, you will love the Via de la Plata because it's mostly like that. I really did enjoy the scenery. You don't meet many pilgrims. I think I didn't meet my first pilgrim probably for the first week. Yeah, it's pretty incredible, isn't it? And then in total on the Via de la Plata, I probably met 20 in about 35 days. So it gives you an idea of the difference between, those really popular Caminos and something like the Via de la Plata, which is by no means, the most remote Camino. There's no luggage services, nothing like that. You're very much on your own. Generally, you're carrying all the water and food that you need for the day, so the whole sort of logistics element is a little bit more challenging. I had a great Camino. I loved it. I met some amazing people. I'm not going to name names, but you know who I'm talking about. I met a lovely couple from Australia and walked with them for about 10 days, I think. Not kind of with, but on the same sections each day, sort of within sight of each other, and we'd have meals together and stay in the same places. So that was really nice. And then they went off on a different route, and I teamed up then with a couple of American guys who were awesome, such great company. They had walked many Caminos before, and I think I walked with them for about 2 weeks up onto the Frances, around to Ponferrada, and lots of other people along the way as well. That meeting of other pilgrims, I don't know, it was a little bit more intense than I'd experienced before, maybe perhaps because of the lack of other pilgrims on the route, you tend to sort of bond quicker and deeper. I don't know, but form some really good friendships that will definitely continue. I'm already arranging to catch up with people. So the Via de la Plata was great. It was a little bit challenging. Hey, look, I often say, if I can do it, anyone can. I actually managed to plan the Via de la Plata so that I was walking sub 25 kilometre days. So one of the big concerns that people have is that, there's long distances between stops, between villages. I did a lot of research prior, and I managed to walk every day almost under 25 kilometres. Very often they were 20, very often down to 15 or 12. That's one of the challenges on the Via de la Plata, that it's a bit like a chess game. You have to kind of think ahead 2 or 3 days. If I walk 20 k's today, it's going to leave me a short day of 10 and then another 20, or I could walk 25 today, but that'll mean a 35 tomorrow. So you kind of have to think ahead a little bit. So the logistics is a little bit more challenging, but not that difficult. So really enjoyed that. And then the interesting part also was from Granja. So everybody else walking the Via de la Plata went west, heading on the San Andres, and myself and my 2 American amigos went north. So we had a 4-day section heading north to Astorga, and that was great. Did we meet any other pilgrims? 2. I think 2 on that section. And it was really nice. There was some fantastic walking days. There's a couple of sections, and I'll go into this in more detail, called the Via Verde, the Green Way, where old railway lines had been turned into walking tracks. So just imagine you've got this beautiful path, nice and flat, going through the countryside, which used to be a railway path, a railway track. So that was great. And then it was really interesting coming towards Astorga, because we could see the mountains in the distance. The mountains, going up to Fontgiron and around that area. I could see that 3 or 4 days prior to Astorga, and a sort of sense of excitement started to build about, back on the Frances and walking up over Fontgiron and the Cruz de Ferro and that sort of stuff. So I started to then think about, what's it going to be like hitting the Frances? Because I had heard, online on Eva's forum and places like that the Frances was really busy this year. And I was kind of in 2 minds, I was excited to get back on the Frances because I've walked that 3 times. It's the only one I had walked before. It feels like my Camino home, and a very special Camino. So I was excited to get back to it, but somewhat nervous about the numbers. And certainly when we arrived in Astorga, it was busy. In the Plaza Mayor in Astorga, there was pilgrims everywhere. So the first day out of Astorga, I was really excited. I wanted to leave early because I wanted to make sure, a couple of reasons actually. One, I wanted to stay in a Donativo albergue in Rabanal, which you can't book. And I've heard so much about it, and I really wanted to get there quite early to make sure I got a bed, so I wanted to leave early for that. And it's the one run by the Confraternity of St. James, whose name I can never pronounce. Is it Guacamole? Right next to the church. So I wanted to get there early. The other thing I wanted to do was to drop into the Pilgrims Grove, and if you haven't been to that, I would urge you to do that. Just outside of Astorga, it's a couple of k's west. You go past it. There's a little ermita there, a little chapel, and then right next to it, there's the Pilgrims Memorial Grove. And I particularly wanted to drop in there and I guess just pay my respects to the memory of Denise Tien, who died on Camino in 2015. So that was important to me to drop in there. So I left early to be able to do that and to get to Ravenel. I couldn't believe the number of pilgrims on the road. I think I left at 6:30 a.m. and coming out of Astorga in the dark, I think there were 15 pilgrims ahead of me. I was just staggered, and I thought, oh no, what's this going to be like? So I dropped into the Pilgrims Memorial Grove, and that was really nice, and then headed on towards Ravenel. And it was at the point where I'd sort of stopped to step aside, maybe to have a drink of water and look around, and boom, a stampede of pilgrims will go past. And it was quite hilarious because I stopped in, was it Santa Catalina, one of the early villages, for breakfast. And I walked into this cafe for breakfast, and there were more pilgrims in that cafe than I had seen in the whole previous month. There must have been 30 in there having breakfast, which was, amazing. And then I sit down to eat my breakfast. You know who you are. But the guy on the next table sort of said, hang on, are you Rob from Rob's Camino? So we had a lovely chat. And that was quite fun. I think I met 10 or 12 subscribers to the channel just in a couple of days on the Camino Frances. So thank you guys for coming up and saying hello. And it was great to meet you and get your feedback on what videos you liked and so on. So anyway, the Camino Frances bit, sorry, I'm just watching the timer on here because my camera runs out at 30 seconds and I'm starting to go on a bit, 30 minutes rather. So the Camino Frances bit was wonderful, and I got to stay in the Donativa Ravenel, which was great, fantastic hosts, and they have afternoon tea in the afternoon there at 4 o'clock, I think it was, where you get to meet all the other pilgrims, and that was a wonderful experience. And we went to we went to the church in the evening, which was a really nice experience. And then the next morning up, of course, to the Cruz de Ferro. So I went from Ravenel to El Acebo over the Cruz de Ferro. That's the 4th time I've stopped at the Cruz de Ferro. It is such a tearjerker for me. I'll probably do a video on that whole experience, but yeah, a very moving experience to go through there again, and met some wonderful people up there. You know who you are, that we walked together after that down to El Acebo. Stayed in that big pilgrim albergue at the end of El Acebo, the one with all the flags, which was great. Had a really nice meal there and a beautiful bar area where you can sit out and watch the sunset. So that was really nice. And then the next day down to Ponferrada. And it was nice to be in Ponferrada again. So that was the 3 days then on the Camino Frances. From there, I had to say goodbye to my American amigos and other people that I had met along the way, and because I was heading off on the Camino Invierno. So everybody else was heading west on the Camino Frances, and I headed off on the Camino Invierno. I'd heard so much about the Camino Invierno, and I'll be truthful, I wanted to walk it before it gets too popular, because I have a sense that it's going to get very popular. Because the last sections, the last 100, 200 of the Camino Frances is getting particularly popular, I think a lot of people are going to start switching over to the Invierno. And I just wanted to walk it, before it got too busy. It was staggering. If you've seen my blog, on my first day out of Ponferrada on the Invierno, I think I made a video where I said something like, this is the Camino I'm supposed to walk. It just felt incredible. It was even more remote in terms of the number of pilgrims than the Via de la Plata, which kind of surprised me. How many people did I meet on the Invierno? Probably altogether 6 in 2 weeks. I met a couple of Spanish guys, a German couple, I think that's about it. Let's say 6 pilgrims, probably in 2 weeks. I don't think, I was going to say I didn't even have a meal with another pilgrim. I did once. And so I'll give you a sense of, you know, how much more lonely it is. But what made it good? Oh, the scenery is stunning, absolutely stunning. A lot of ups and downs. So I'm glad I'd had 35 days of walking already, so I was pretty fit. So if you walk the Camino Frances, you know, on day one walking up to Orizon, there was a few days like that, up and down, but absolutely amazing scenery. You're going, you know, up mountains, down into river valleys. There are vineyards up the side of the mountains. Just incredible. If you are considering the Camino Invierno, I would urge you to have a go. What's the infrastructure like? It's actually pretty good. The signposting is amazing. Someone mentions that the local government authorities had spent a lot of money upgrading the signage. There are so many, what do you call those, mahonas, the little concrete pillars with the arrows. There are so many of those. I've never seen so many in my life. Almost every junction's got one. There is just enough infrastructure in terms of places to stay. So again, I was averaging about 20 kilometres a day, and I managed to do that. A couple of times I had to go slightly off Camino, a few hundred metres, and stay in a Casa Rural or something like that, but it was really, really doable. And I stayed in some amazing places. So have a look at the blog, robscamino.com, go and have a look at that. I've actually broken down that blog now into sections. So if you go to the menu for 2023, I think it's called Daily Blog. On that first page, it breaks it down. So there's the VDLP, there's the 3 days on the Frances, there's the Invierno, and you can sort of follow each of the sections. Yeah, the infrastructure was fine. I think the only thing that maybe there wasn't a lot of was water fonts, but I was used to that on the VDLP. There were virtually none there anyway. So I was used to carrying my water for the day. I think only 2 or 3 days on the Invierno I came across water fonts. There were quite a few fonts, but they didn't have signs on them saying it was potable water. So I'm a little bit reluctant to use it unless it says that it's safe to drink. So the Invierno, I don't want to talk too much about it. I'll do a whole video on it. Some of the places were just amazing. And then what happens on the Invierno is before you get to Santiago, I think it's the penultimate day, you join the Sanabres. So all the people who have walked up the VDLP and gone west on the Sanabres, you join them a couple of days out from Santiago, and also the people who have come from Orense and places like that. So that was quite funny because I really hadn't seen any other pilgrims other than a couple for 2 weeks. And as I was walking along, and I knew the two were coming together. I forget the name of the village. I should have looked that up. But I could see about a kilometre over on my left-hand side, a couple of pilgrims walking on the other route. I almost felt like a quicken in my step. Oh, more pilgrims, I want to go and talk to them. And I actually did catch them up about an hour later. A lovely couple from Canada. And so that was interesting, having, coming back onto, if you like, a more common route, going into Santiago. And amazingly, I had breakfast the next day, and a guy came down and sat with me to have breakfast, and we were chatting for about 20 minutes. And I said, we met before, haven't we? And we were kind of racking our brains, and we came up with, yes, it was 3 weeks ago on the Via de la Plata in this particular village, where we had met for 10 minutes amongst a larger group. So one of those strange coincidences. And then so on those final couple of days, I did see a few more pilgrims. The thing that a couple of people had mentioned to me is that the entrance into Santiago from the Camino Invierno is probably one of the best. It is. It is. It's certainly the best I've done. It's amazing. You get to within a kilometre of the cathedral, really, before you feel like you're in a city. So, it's rural all the way, and not like coming in off the Frances, where the last couple of hours you're going over a motorway and through the suburbs and all that kind of stuff. when you come in off the Invierno, it kind of just tips you into Santiago before you know it. And literally you come down this sort of grassy lane, it's sort of cobblestones with grass and stuff, and you look up and you go, oh no, there's the cathedral. It's about 1 kilometre away. So that was an amazing entry, and then you sort of go up the hill to the cathedral. And I was lucky to walk in with a couple of people that I'd met that day. So Camino Invierno, loved it, highly recommend it. Was an amazing experience. So then I had a day off in Santiago, and I had a bit more time, and I kind of planned to do this anyway. So I wanted to walk out to Fisterra, and Muxía. I had been to Muxía before just on the bus, and I felt I wanted to finish this Camino in Muxía. And you know, it's funny how you get ideas about stuff. To me, the Camino out to Fisterra had always in the back of my mind kind of been this add-on. You know, when you get to Santiago, if you've got some time, go and walk to Fisterra. I never really thought of it as a Camino in its own right, but it was amazing. And I met quite a few pilgrims. There was quite a few on it. I met quite a few pilgrims who were only walking from Santiago to Fisterra. That was their Camino. There was a couple of days on the Camino Fisterra, which I think was some of the best days that I walked, just in terms of the scenery and so on. It was really nice. Quite a lot of road walking. I should mention the Camino Invierno had quite a lot of road walking as well. But I was surprised with the Camino Fisterra. I really enjoyed it. And particularly, you know, the last day or so. Again, I kept my distances fairly short. So let me just look at my notes. I took 10 days to get to Fisterra and up to Muxía. But, you know, coming then to the ocean at Cee, C-E-E, which I think is pronounced Cee, you know, and you look out onto the ocean, it's like, wow, I've walked across a whole country and there's the ocean. And then down to Cee. I was going to stay there, but actually I went on to Corbion, a lovely little fishing village. And then that just gave me a short stage into Fisterra, and I went out to the lighthouse. The lighthouse was okay. It's over a 3K trek up a hill and back again. Where I really felt, I don't know, sort of more emotion, more energy was on the beach at Fisterra. When I hit Fisterra, I actually went down onto the beach and walked the last couple of k's along the beach, and that was just amazing. If you don't know the history of the area, it's supposedly where St. James landed. It's an ancient Roman religious site, pagan site, and you kind of feel that walking along the beach. You know, there's not a great sense of that up at the lighthouse. Just watching the clock. So that was great. And then my final day was walking to Muxía. I hadn't left enough time to split that into two. So there's a village halfway, Liris, where I could have stayed. But I did that final day in one. So it was 30 k's basically, a couple of pretty steep hills to get over. So it was kind of my hardest walking day of the whole lot. And I left it, you know, until last. But I kind of took this attitude, like, if I get injured and can't walk tomorrow, it doesn't matter. It's my last day. But I managed it fine. And that was amazing to then finally finish in Muxía, sitting out on the rocks by that chapel and collecting my thoughts there. So altogether, an amazing journey. Would I do 1,200 kilometres again? Probably not. And I'll talk about that in later videos, but it's a case of I don't feel I need to walk that far to enjoy a Camino or to get the sort of benefits that a Camino offers. And it's a long time out, and you know, to leave family and so on. So maybe in the future I'll be doing shorter ones, but let's reflect back on that. So I walked 3 full Caminos and 3 days on the Frances. Let's just recap and see if you can guess which was the best bit. So let's look at my notes here. There was 35 days on the Via de la Plata. Sevilla, up to Granja, up to Astorga, quite remote, wonderful landscapes. And the history, the Roman history is stunning. I then had 3 days on the Camino Frances, really busy. 3 days going from Astorga over to Ponferrada, bridging across to the Camino Invierno. I took excuse me, I took 13 days to walk the Camino Invierno, day off in Santiago, and then 10 days to walk the Camino Fisterra and out to Muxía. So kind of 3 full Caminos and 3 days on the Camino Frances in between. Which do you think had the biggest impact on me or was the most enjoyable? I'll tell you, it was the 3 days on the Camino Frances. It totally threw me. It was so busy. Why was that? And it was only, I think, 2 weeks later when I was having breakfast with that friend 2 days out from Santiago who I'd met on the Via de la Plata. And I was relating this to him, and I said, you know, I enjoyed this bit and this bit and this bit, but you know, the best bit, 3 days on the Frances, why is that? And on reflection, I put it down to a couple of things. One is that the sense of history on the Camino Frances, to my mind, is unsurpassed. I've only walked 4 routes, so you know, I haven't walked some of the other popular ones. But that sense of history and knowing that millions upon millions of pilgrims have walked that path before you just gives it a different energy. And I have to tell you, when I walked from Astorga to Rabanal, I did it an hour quicker than planned. I just had so much energy that day. It was like, I'm home, you know, I'm back on the Frances, steaming along. The next day, going up to Fonsavedena, I just straight up the hill. You know, it was an incredible sense of energy. And you know, going over the Cruz de Ferro and that deep sense of sort of spirituality up there. The people, I met some amazing people just in 3 days. And you know, the impression it left on me was that, Rob, you have sought out more remote Caminos. You've sought out solitude on the Via de la Plata and the Invierno particularly, because of your fear of the Frances being, you know, so busy. But what it taught me, actually, was that the beauty of the Camino is in the community around you, that spirit that you get from the other people, the energy, the joy, the interactions. And that is so intense, I think, on the Camino Frances, that's why that bit was the most enjoyable. So I was really surprised by that. But, you know, on reflection, it kind of makes sense. So all the other parts were amazing. That 3 days on the Camino Frances was just a step above. And I think because of all the people and the history and the energy and so on. So there you go. Bit of a surprise. So thanks for watching. My time is almost up. This video is going to run out in a minute. So if you're not already subscribed, do please subscribe. And I look forward to sharing heaps and heaps of videos in the coming weeks about particular aspects of this last Camino, particularly around albergues. I stayed on lots of albergues, so I can share some pretty good thoughts on that now. So thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye for now.